Okay.
I'm gonna wait beside me. No, she said she didn't want to listen to this story. But today I'm going to tell you a story about the Little Red Riding Hood. Well, the Little Red Riding Hood, she was a little girl. She was loved by everyone that seen her, and especially her grandmother. Her grandma loved her very much. But there was a man who came to her house and said that Grandma was sick and that she wanted to see Little Red Riding Hood very bad. And so she went to see Grandma, and her mother had got done baking some cake that she was wanting to take to her grandma, and she took her some wine to drink with her cake. And so she went and took the path to her grandmother's house, and her mama told her, do not stray off the path. There are bad things out there in the woods. And so Little Red Riding Hood, she went walking down the path to her grandmother's house, and she came across some pretty flowers. She just had to pick some for her grandmother. So she stopped and picked her grandmother some flowers. And she saw the wolf, and the wolf asked her, he was like, well, what's your name? She said, the Little Red Riding Hood. And he wanted to know where she was going and what she had in her basket. So she told him that she's got some cake for grandmother and some wine, and that she was going to take it to grandmother's house, which was about a league away from the path, and it's down by the woods near 3 nut trees that were right below her house. And so she went on to the house where grandmother lived. But when she got there, the wolf had already got to grandmother's house. And he knocked on the door and he said that, Grandma, it's Little Red Riding Hood. I brought you some cake and wine. And so she said, I'm too weak. Just unlatch the door and come on in. So he unlatched the door and he devoured grandmother. So after he devoured her, she took his clothes and put them on so she'd look like grandmother, and put her old lady cap on too. And so he got in bed, laid down, and a little while later, another knock on the door came. It was Little Red Riding Hood. But she found that the door was already open. She thought that was very uneasy of grandmother to leave the door open. And so she walked in, and she seen grandmother laying in bed, and she said, Grandmother, what big ears you have. Well, darling, they're better to hear you with. And then she was like, what big eyes you have. They're better to see you with, my child. What big hands you have. They're better to hug you with. What big mouth you have. Better to eat you with. So the wolf ate Little Red Riding Hood. And he got back in bed and he fell fast asleep because his stomach was full of grandmother and Little Red Riding Hood. Oh no, that's right. And so after that, the lumberjack was walking by again and heard some snoring, an awful loud snoring. And he thought that was unusual for grandmother because he comes by her house all the time. So he went in to check, and the wolf was fast asleep. So he was like, I've got you now, you can't get away. And he thought about striking him, but he didn't want to because then he thought that grandmother could be saved. And so he took grandmother and her scissors, and he cut the wolf's stomach open, and out popped Little Red Riding Hood. And then grandmother came out. They were still alive. So he sent Little Red Riding Hood outside to get some rocks, and he filled the wolf's stomach up with rocks, and then he got her to get some needle and thread so he could sew it back up. And so when the wolf woke up, he decided he was going to run because he knew something was wrong. So he took and he started running. Something was hurting his stomach. So he held his stomach and he kept running. And then all of a sudden the rocks fell out of his stomach and he died. And so Little Red Riding Hood, she went back home. And she was sure to stay on the path like her mother had told her, because she found out that bad things could happen and she wasn't going to talk to people. And so on her way home, she didn't see anything, so she kept going. She got home. In the end, she was happy. Her mother was glad to see her and everything. So that's the end of the story.
Yay! Good job.